good. Ken, I was wondering if you could tell me your birthday and where you were born.
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. What is your birthday and where were you born?
10/14/45, right here.
Wow.
Well, at the hospital in Everett, we lived here, yeah.
Yes. Wow. Were your parents living in the house that you're in?
No, not this one, the one that we have next door.
Okay. Okay. And is next door where the farm market is?
No.
No.
We're down.
No, the house is on the same property.
Okay.
It had been the original house, just a 2-room house, and my parents, when they first got married, lived in that, and that's when I was born. And this was the house that was built in 1914 that we live in now. And my grandparents lived in it.
We're about a mile down the road from Bob and Linda. It's
Yes.
two different places. Okay.
Okay. So you just had a birthday. Happy birthday, Ken.
Okay, thank you.
How old does that make you be now?
I'm 75.
Oh, well, that's not bad. You're just a youngster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very good. So you grew up, is it on a farm in Duvall on River Road?
Well, my dad and mother lived here, and my uncle was in the Navy. And when he got out of the Navy, him and his wife moved here, and my folks moved to Duvall for just a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then my uncle and his brother, my other uncle, they went to they went out to Forks to log.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the farm had to keep on going. And so my dad and mother bought a herd of cows and started farming here again.
Mm-hmm.
And so that went on for, well, a long time, I guess until the mid 1960s. And then my dad sold all the cows because my brother and I were both in the military, been drafted and whatnot. So then he raised crops for a while, and of course that failed. Not failed, but they got flooded out.
Okay.
And so then my wife and I got cows and started milking cows again here.
Mm-hmm.
And did that until 2009, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. So there's been Kosters in Duvall. There's been Kosters in Duvall a long time.
No,
No?
they've only been here since 1940.
1940. Okay.
The Kosters.
My
My mother's family came in 1903.
Okay.
Okay.
What was her maiden name?
My mother's maiden name was Spolstra.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the Spolstras and the Russasunders, that was my grandmother's maiden name, lived in Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
And when her family moved here next door in 1916, of course, she came and married my grandfather here, and they homesteaded in Montana then.
Mm-hmm.
For a couple of years, and then they came back here and rented this adjoining farm, and that's where we've been.
Uh-huh. So you're related to the Reticenders too?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the oldest great grandchild of Russasunder, the original. My great grandfather. I was the first great grandchild.
Yes.
Because my grandmother was the oldest Russasunder daughter.
Uh-huh. I see. Yeah. And she lived out here a long time.
Yeah.
In the area. Wow. You have roots, that's for sure. Wow. So did you grow up going to school here in Duvall?
Yes. Yes, it was kind of an interesting story there because in 1949, they didn't have enough children to have a kindergarten class of the right age. And so they rolled the age back into November in order to have enough children to have a kindergarten, and had Mrs. McCormick then as our kindergarten teacher. And some of us, the ones born in November, they held them back a year before they started first grade, but I started first grade when I was 5 in Duvall. Yeah, that was in the old school.
And that was in Cherry Valley Elementary?
It's where the Cherry Hill apartments are.
Yes, yeah.
That was our old school.
Yep. I heard that Mrs. McCormick was a very strict teacher.
I was a pallbearer for her funeral.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, she was but more of them were disciplinarians at that time too.
Yes, I bet.
She had standards. Yep.
They had the stick out, the ruler.
Excuse me?
They used the ruler if needed.
You held out your hand and smack. Yep.
Wow.
You had your hand on your desk and yeah. So
wow.
Good, bad, I don't know. I think that some people like now had learning disabilities then too, and they seem to be punished quite a bit, but we only had to go to school through the 8th grade.
Yeah.
Okay. And after that, and there was always work, there was work available for everybody, it seemed like. But I know that when I was in the 8th grade, there was a boy in the 6th grade that drove to school legally. He was 16 years old and he completed the 8th grade yet, but he was about 17 or 18 when he completed the 8th grade.
Oh, well, he was determined.
Yes, and that was good.
Good for him.
He worked on a farm close here, and but the people took care of him and sent him to school, and that was good.
Yeah. Wow. Did you go to school with Tom Norenberg?
Yeah, Tom was in every other year. We were in the same class.
Okay.
No, that's because 1st and 2nd grade were in the same classroom.
Yes.
And 3rd and 4th grade were in the same classroom.
Okay.
Every other year, we were the older ones, and Tom was a year behind me.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
so in all of our school photos, I have Tom every other year. You know.
Well, you must be good friends.
I must be what?
Good friends with him.
Yeah, you know. Actually, he had enlisted in the Army Reserves, and him and I was being inducted. We were at the induction center the same day, and he was going to do his training, and I was being drafted. And we got to Fort Ord, and there was an outbreak of meningitis.
Oh.
Okay, and so all of us then that had been drafted, they sent to Texas to another fort.
Oh.
And people that had enlisted like Tom, they had to stay at Fort Ord.
Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I hope he didn't get sick.
No, he didn't get it or he'd be dead.
Yeah. Wow. There's been many other pandemics, hasn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And your parents could have told us a lot about that too, I'm sure.
They what?
Your parents probably saw a lot of pandemics if they lived in 1918.
Well, we were, everybody knew everybody.
Yes.
Okay.
She's asking about the pandemic.
And it's like they talk about law enforcement now, and everybody knew who the policeman was in Duvall and where he lived.
Yeah.
And he knew everybody and where they lived. So we didn't have things go on like we do now.
Right. Right. And you just had a sheriff at one time, I understand, no police department.
Who's that, Shorty?
Well, I understand that originally there was only it was only covered by the sheriff, King County Sheriff Department, before they got their police.
That was kind of off and on.
Okay.
But the wash repairman in Duvall that lives on that property where the park and ride is now by the bridge.
Yeah.
He was the wash repairman, and he was he was a deputy coroner. And so he was our sheriff in this area at that time.
Okay.
And that was all the way through the 1950s.
Yeah. Wow. And everybody knew him.
Of course.
Yeah.
No, everybody knew everybody.
Yeah. Well, did everybody get along, or were there conflicts?
I don't remember. They got along. There were fusses and arguments and things like that, but everybody pretty much got along. I mean, they learned to live with it, or did live with it, and that was not a big issue.
Yep. So tell me again, your parents, what were both of their names?
Both of their names?
Mm-hmm.
My dad's name was Garrett Kosters.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was May Spoolstra.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they were married October 29th, 1944.
Okay.
Okay.
And she lived quite a long time, didn't she?
She, on her 93rd birthday, rode my wife's horse. And then she died a couple of weeks later. Yeah.
And I heard she was quite famous around here.
Yes.
May Kosters.
I suppose she was. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was in the, she watched or was in the air tower in Duvall. Did her shifts in there during the war.
Okay.
And of course she knew we always knew everybody in school.
Mm-hmm.
She graduated from Duvall High School in 1942.
Yeah.
And after that, then, because all the boys went into the military, there wasn't enough people to have a high school here in Duvall.
Yeah.
And so then, some went to Monroe, some went to Bothell, and some went to Tolt.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, they reached an agreement at some time or another and combined with Coronation for the high school.
Yeah. Wow. So tell me about the air tower. Ken, nobody else has told me about the air tower in Duvall in the war.
It is in one of my dad's books.
Oh, okay. I guess I just didn't see it.
And if you know where Rocky Knee Feed is?
Yes.
Okay, if you go up to the very top of that hill, and it was a cabin, and that was the Air Watch tower. Not a tower, but they had people a telephone and watched for, I guess, an enemy attacks. You know, everybody was kind of worried at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
There's kind of a joke about it. I'm sure it's a joke, but I don't know. That one of the girls or women saw an airplane towing a cylindrical balloon and a plane flying over, and she called it in that there was a plane towing a submarine.
Well, I'm sure it looked like it.
Yeah.
It's great.
But
Wow.
no, that building, I don't know where it ended up. It was sold in 1950s sometime or another and then taken apart. But yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Did all the little towns like in this area have air towers?
I would suppose they had it covered somewhere or another.
Mm-hmm.
You know, blackouts they had everything blacked out here.
Yep.
All the windows on the barns and everything were covered with black paper or whatnot, and it was all. And I think until things got settled, sometime after Pearl Harbor, or maybe a year or so later, that they had kept a pretty close eye on things.
Mm-hmm. I guess we aren't very far from Puget Sound. You know, you think Everett, and the planes could have come in over Puget Sound and come this way. I know that Whidbey Island had that station.
Well, that was later.
Okay.
The Naval Air Station there, my uncle, my mother's oldest brother, was crippled from a horse crash, and he was an engineer, and he worked on the construction at the Whidbey Island Air Base, doing the design work. So all they had was the only for protection for Puget Sound was the forts, Fort Casey, Fort Flagler, and the 3 forts to keep shipping from coming into Puget Sound all the way down.
We visited those, and you can walk all over the place where the guns were, and
there was Fort Ward and Fort Flagler, I think, and Fort Casey, all in they covered the entrance to Puget Sound coming down here. And as soon as it was demonstrated by the Japanese that airplanes could be used effectively against ships, okay, they proved it at Pearl Harbor. Then they built air bases along the coast and patrolled with airplanes. So those forts had outlived their usefulness. And probably when they had it protected by all those planes out there is when they stopped doing the air watches here too. But initially, they didn't have that.
Yeah. Wow. So did you have any brothers or sisters? Tell me about them.
Well, I have 2 brothers.
2 brothers.
But I never had any sisters, no.
Okay, and your brothers are, what are their names?
Ted and Bob.
Ted and Bob.
Yeah.
And did you say Bob is the one that wrote the books for the Historical Society?
He's the one that has the vegetables up the road here.
Okay, yeah.
Because Ted lives in Eastern Washington.
Oh, does he? So they're both still alive?
I hope so. I'm the oldest.
Very good. Very good. Well, what was it like to grow up on the River Road? Hi, Eunice.
I wanted to tell you, Ken said his dad's name was Garrett, but he was known as Bob Kosters also, and he's the one that did the writing in the books you read, Ken's father.
Okay,
His name
thank
was-
you.
His name was Garrett because he had two brothers that were also Garrett.
They're all Garrett's?
There were 9 children, 10 children, or 12 children in the family. But the custom from where they had come from and their background is, even though they came here in the 1860s, they always lived in a Dutch community.
Okay, yes.
And the custom is that the oldest son was named after the father's father. The second son was named after the mother's father. And the third son was named after the father.
Okay.
So if they were all named the same thing, they all had the same names.
That's hilarious. That's wonderful.
But well, my oldest uncle had a middle name, and because his grandfather had a middle name, and my grandmother's father didn't have a middle name, so my dad didn't have a middle name. They were named the same, yeah. You didn't have any options. And I know there was a large fuss when I was born, because I was the oldest grandchild or grandson, and I was supposed to be named for my grandfather. And my parents broke tradition and named me on their own.
Is that a Dutch tradition?
What's that?
Is it especially a Dutch?
Yep.
Is that a Dutch tradition?
Oh, that's, well, European, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Northern European, German, Dutch, whatever. The differences were is that in the Norwegian and Swedish cultures, okay, and here in the early 1900s, they had to start stating their name, because before that it was always like Eric. If he was a son of Eric, he was Eric's son.
Yes.
Okay, that was his last name.
Yeah.
And if he was Donald's son, he was Donald's son. Okay, so yeah. And that was just the way they did it.
Yeah.
It was probably with the German and Dutch culture, it was, name it after the grandfathers.
Ken, tell her about growing up on the River Road. That's what she asked you, what it was like to grow up on the River Road.
Oh, okay. No, yeah. River Road, well, of course, at that time, when I grew up here, and even when my wife and I first came back here, there were still 13 dairy farms on the road here, operating dairy farms. And we had, we might have gone to town once a week to church, okay? But we had our own food, pretty much. And what we didn't have, bread and whatnot, there were delivery trucks here that came down and supplied those things.
Yes. Wow.
But yeah, so I guess that was probably the first 10 years of my life. I remember it being that way, and just not very much traffic. The only traffic would have been people picking up the milk to take it to the processor in Seattle.
Okay.
That was about,
went to Seattle.
There was no, you had your own feed and all of that, so everything was done pretty much here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. So you also had a large garden, and you grew your own, is it grass for eating or for the feed?
We had a large garden, and we canned all of our food, or even our meat, and the meat, because refrigeration wasn't much in yet. We had a refrigerator and a freezer, later on a freezer, but everything was canned to preserve it. And so we've still we still have canned meat.
Uh-huh.
My
Did
wife
you
and I
also
and my mother-
have, did you have cattle for eating and also pork, pigs and chickens?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and we had our eggs and we had our milk and meat.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there were pigs.
Mm-hmm.
What they did was they the milk that wasn't sellable, that was for the pigs. And, you
Mhm.
know, yeah, it was all
Recycle.
pretty much in-house.
Yeah, recycle. Yeah, very back to the land and sustainable.
I guess, you know, no,
Very
it's nothing that my kids know about, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Did you have any friends out in the area that you get together with, or were you mostly busy doing chores?
Well, all of
Eugene Ansel.
there were neighbors, and so we always, you know, played together and all of that stuff. Neighbors, and of course, a lot of the neighbors were my relatives. Okay. And I remember my great grandfather had the first television set. He bought the first television set in the area. And so he would always, in the afternoon, after school, he would have his grandkids who were my age, and I was a great grandchild. And we went down to his house and he would turn on this television set. And all it had was a test pattern. And then television would come on for 2 15-minute shows. And then it was back to test pattern. One station, test pattern, that was it. And so, yeah. But I remember we'd all sit around. He like I said, he dressed all up, put a suit and tie on and all of that so we could watch television.
That's great. Yep. That's wonderful. Do you remember what the shows were?
Birthday Club was one of them. I think it was all just Channel 5 was all that we had on. And there were just 2 local shows, you know, from Seattle. Really don't remember the other one. Later, then Howdy Doody and all them came on, but that was after the initial TV set. Thing.
Yeah. And radio was a very big thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, we always listened to the radio.
Yeah.
They used to, I remember Sunday mornings, read the Sunday funnies on the radio.
Oh,
So we could, if we had a newspaper, we could look at the funnies, but we didn't have to know how to read because they read it for us. I don't, you know.
Well, was your school very difficult? Was there a lot were there homework to do at home?
Did I what?
Was school very difficult and sent homework to do at home?
No. No, I don't remember being difficult, but I'm sure that for some students it was probably very difficult. But it wasn't for me. If I applied myself.
I heard that Rose Nuremberg had the library, and she was very good with kids in encouraging reading.
Yep. And before her, there was another librarian.
Oh.
I remember the other one before Rose.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
I was in the parade that opened the new bridge.
Oh.
The bridge that goes into Duvall now. When they first opened that, they had a bridge opening day celebration. And so I was in a cart with I think it was the library kids or whatever. I went through in the parade.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Did Duvall have other celebrations like that with parades?
What's that?
Holiday? Did Duvall have any other celebrations during the year?
Like parades.
Well, no. You mean in Duvall?
Yeah,
No.
not usual. Okay.
I suppose everybody with their own church had their things, but there weren't any, Duvall, what they call Duvall days now.
Yeah.
That didn't happen until bicentennial in 1976.
Okay. Wow.
And but they'd had before that, they had years before, when Duvall had been a big town, they had a fair and everything there in Duvall. But that was before my time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Duvall had been quite a large town. But then in the 1940s and the 1950s, that's when it went down to 250 or 300 people.
Yeah.
And in the community.
Wow.
But the population of Duvall had been diminished a lot.
Yeah.
Well, what there probably was 5 or 6 sawmills around here, or shingle mills and sawmills right around Duvall. And so there were all the workers, the labor and whatnot. And then, I would imagine, I would think that sometime in the 1910s, 1920, in that period of time, that Duvall had probably been about 600 or 700 people.
Yeah.
And then
And the 2 different railroads.
then it just about became a ghost town.
Yeah. Well, that was the end of the logging era, I guess, the end of the era. And then the dairy set in. It was more of a dairy farm town, right?
It was the end of the big, the big logging era, yes.
What church did your family go to a church, or was that common with the Dutch farmers?
Okay, above the fire hall, where the Catholic church burnt down, down the hill from there's the community hall or community center, kids. That was the church.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it looks like it was built to be a church.
It was the Reformed church. It was Dutch.
It called Dutch Reformed?
They called it Christian Reform, but it was Dutch Reform.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was interesting because as a child, and it moved from Duvall to Monroe, combined and moved to Monroe in 1952 or 53.
Okay.
But when I was a child, younger, my parents would take us to the Methodist church. We would go to Sunday school at the Methodist church because the Reformed church, that was only Dutch language. Okay, so the everything there was in the old. It was kind of funny when my father and his family, like I said, had moved here in the 1860s. And in 1970, he decided to go visit to see where the family had come from. And I asked him when he left, would language be a problem? And he said no, because he grew up speaking Dutch at home. Okay. And all that. Anyway, when he got home, I asked him if it had been a problem, how the language went. And he said, everybody thought he was from South Africa.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because he had the same dialect as when the South Africans moved to South Africa.
Yeah.
And so he could get along, but they knew he wasn't from there.
Yeah.
that was kind of funny, but yeah.
Did your parents ever speak Dutch at home?
Did they do what?
Your parents speak Dutch at home for you?
No. My dad could speak it and understand it. My mother could understand it. Okay, but no.
Mm-hmm.
By then, they probably decided that we were going to stay here.
Yes, yeah.
I had relatives from here that had actually grew up here from the 1860s and whatnot, and their families in it sold everything and moved back to Netherlands. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, they came back. It was, by then they were too Americanized.
Uh-huh. Hard to go the other way, too.
Yeah, they were, one of them actually, the father had sold everything and moved back there, and he was in school, my great uncle then, and the war happened, World War I, and they got trapped in Holland with all the submarine and the torpedoing and whatnot. They couldn't leave. They had to stay there for a couple of years. So he would never go back again.
No. Wow. Wow. Gosh. Did your family have any special foods that you ate that were traditional Dutch?
Any special what?
Foods or meals?
Yes.
Grilled cheese.
That was, my grandfather died in 1959, and he'd always taken care of the garden. As a grandparent, it was his job was the garden.
Mm-hmm.
It took several years for us to figure out what to plant because we didn't know the English name.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and but because my dad's family had come from one part of Holland, and my grandmother's family, or my mother's family, had come from another part, they had their own dishes that they had, their own food.
Okay.
And so, yeah, my folks ended up kind of a combination of both.
Uh-huh.
Things that my mother's family hadn't eaten here, that my mother didn't know about as a girl. When my dad's family came here from South Dakota, then they started eating those, but they hadn't before. Yeah.
Can you tell me about any of them that you liked?
The ones that I liked, the food? Roggebrood. That's a rye bread.
Okay.
Roggebrood. And what they call liverwurst, but it wasn't a liverwurst. It was a loaf with liver and heart and whatnot, tongue and stuff like that in it, and flour and spices. And we fried that for breakfast in the morning, and that's a favorite of mine. My mother was making that yet a couple years ago, and we had, the name... Banquet, that's a dessert, an almond paste dessert. And what we call palechi, that was sugar peas. Sugar pea, the pod pea, edible pod. Okay. And that was the Dutch name. And krauwrouten, that was a dry pea that you soaked overnight and then cooked. So yeah, that was,
Did they do like a big potato salad that had eggs in it and big pieces of bacon?
My wife still does that.
What do you call that?
Just potato salad is all I know about.
But it's a special way that's kind of Dutch. I'm partly Dutch, and my dad was, and he grew up with something they just called it Dutch mess.
Where did he grow up?
What?
Where did he grow up?
Iowa. But his grandparents, they served Dutch mess, which was kind of the potato salad. And I've been in Belgium, the northern part.
Yep, same thing.
Yeah, they have that. A lot of big pork pieces and things in the salad. I can hardly eat it. It's very filling.
Well, okay, so your father, he either came from the Pella area or from the New Holland area, or the Sioux City area, Sioux Center.
Well, no, I'm very familiar, but he actually grew up in Waterloo, and his dad was LaPorte City, a little bit more to the east.
Okay. See,
but it's still very Dutch in Iowa. Mm-hmm.
In the 1840s, they came to Pella.
Mm-hmm.
The Dutch people did. And my great-grandparents, they moved to northwestern Iowa in 1871 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And like I said, that's why those towns were Dutch.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's still very Dutch. It's still very Dutch reformed. They even have.
You ever heard of Lawrence Welk?
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. Well, who didn't?
he was born and raised in North Dakota.
Yeah.
But he only spoke German.
Yeah.
And that's the way that they were.
Yeah. Well, the Dutch made a big impact on the United States.
No, it's interesting, different things that you hear about, or that, like my father, when he was a child, my father in South Dakota, then just across the border from Iowa. Mm-hmm. But on Sundays, the term was Nalun Sunduck. Okay, we don't speak English on Sunday.
Yeah, yeah.
You had to speak the language that Jesus spoke.
Yes. Love it. That's great. Wow.
Yeah.
So you went off to the military and you were drafted?
Yes.
In the reserves, Army reserves?
That was in 1966.
Okay.
That I was drafted.
Well, did you have to serve overseas anywhere?
I did.
Mm-hmm.
I did.
You were in Korea.
I was married. Okay, but I was on the DMZ in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you remember when the Pueblo was seized?
Yes.
I was there.
Oh.
I was in Korea there at that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was during the active war time.
It's still war. It still
is. I know.
Yeah.
Wow.
But my brother, he was in the Navy, and so he was in Vietnam some, and I was in Korea for 13 months.
Okay. Did you?
Yeah, you couldn't have. There weren't any wives or anything there at all.
Were you? What was your job?
My job?
Army.
I ended up as a motor sergeant. Okay.
What is that?
Well, the Army, of course, it was building up real big at that time, but I did my training in Texas, first training, and they sent me to school in South Carolina and mechanic school. So I became a mechanic, and then with the large influx of more people coming in all the time. They had to keep promoting people. And so, yeah, when I became a motor sergeant. So I was in charge of a company size motor pool.
Okay.
Okay. All the vehicles and everything. Yeah. And, 3 or 4 mechanics.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, the Army really gave you some travel, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
No,
where,
that was
pardon?
I didn't ask for the job.
Right.
It's the one I got.
Yeah. So where did you meet Eunice
At Tolt High School.
in high school?
Tolt High School. Yeah.
Tolt.
We her family moved out here in June of 1962.
Okay.
So when school started in the fall of 1962, I was a senior.
Uh-huh.
He was a sophomore, and that's where we met. And so, yeah, we've been together since 1962, really.
Very good.
Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of a different time.
Yes. Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Yep.
She got to be with me a little bit, or for a few months when I was still in the United States before I went overseas. And of course, when I went over, then we rented a house on the Rosine farm, okay, where the roundabout is now. It's just past that, going to Carnation. There was a set of buildings up on the hill there, and we rented one of the houses there. And so we lived there a couple of years before we moved back down here.
Did you have children already?
No. Our oldest one was born in April of 1969.
So tell me about your kids. What are their names and where are they living?
Okay, the oldest is named after me, and he lives at the real Novelty Hill. Okay.
Okay.
Up by the cemetery.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he lives up there in his grandmother's old place, Eunice's mother. Okay.
Oh.
And our second son is named Corbin. Okay. And he lives in Othello, Washington.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
And our youngest son was born in 1982, and he lives in what was my mother's house, right here,
Next door.
right across the driveway here.
Yes. Okay. Yep. And what's his name?
Colton.
Okay.
Kolten.
Yes. Oh, there's some more unusual names.
Well, not really. When we named Colton and Corbin, for a matter of fact, they were very unusual names, and then they got very popular for some reason. I don't know why. Yeah.
Well, Eunice, what is your maiden name?
My maiden name was Lintow, Lintow, and my mom and dad moved out here. Eventually divorced, and my dad moved back to Burien. My mom stayed here, and she's in a nursing home now.
Monroe.
I wanted to say one thing that Ken didn't bring out. You were talking about his mom, May.
Yes.
Well, she was like a mother to myself and to Linda, and had very strict Dutch rules. You didn't work on Sundays. You mowed your lawn on Saturdays. You always swept your steps, always made your bed. And she always helped us in everything we did.
Wow.
She was She was amazing.
Okay, great. When did she die? Not that long ago.
Ken.
April 23rd, 2015 is when she died.
Mhm.
And basically what happened was she had a bad valve in her heart.
Mhm.
And at 93 years old, they said that it would be too dangerous to operate on her.
Mhm.
The veins were too fragile to do that any operation. And she just said, okay, I guess I'll just quit. That's what she
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, she did. If I'm not going to be able to do what I've always done, then I'm not going to do anything at all. So,
Mhm.
yeah. So that's what she kind of chose her own
Ken,
way.
You were a dairy farmer,
Yes.
like your dad. How,
Like your dad.
What?
She
like
said,
your dad.
like your dad.
Yeah, like my dad and like my granddad and my great granddad and
Yeah.
yeah.
All the way keeps going.
Um,
How many dairy cattle did you have?
at the most I ever had was about 80, 90.
Mhm.
One person job.
Okay.
With the new equipment and whatnot, it was just a one person operation, and I never felt comfortable. If I would have had to hire people and all of that, that would not have been my choice to do.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
and then the writing was on the wall here anyway that seems as though King County wanted the farmers out of here anyway. So
Like the King County planning or something. They
or lack of whatever.
lack of.
The
Wow.
problem was is that the Snoqualmie Valley here,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it's great land for cows. It's not great land for crops or anything like. It's great land for cows because of the climate. Okay, and the grass grows whatever with the natural rain and everything like that. And what the county did was tried to push, and they did manage to get rid of all the dairy farms here, the Department of Ecology or whoever, different branches. They managed to push the dairy farms out of here, and they put in, all this ground is empty now. What are we going to do? And so a lot of these vegetable farms and whatnot around here, and we're always subject to floods here. Even late in the year, sometimes May.
Yes.
We can have
Yeah.
floods over the ground. And when we did have that, and we did all of my life, the cows could always walk up to the higher ground, to the barn.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you plant a seed, it can't move. And so these people aren't really farming crops. They're really farming people. Now, they have these schools and all of that, but it's not my brother is actually produces crops, but most of it's all educational type stuff. And that, I guess it's okay, but what are they really learning?
Yeah. So the county didn't want the dairy farms, and why was that?
Well, it's not just the county. Okay, it's also the state and ecology and whatnot. And you see, all the years that I grew up here, younger years, we always had cows on every farm. Not a lot of cows, but we had every cow, every farm had cows,
Mhm.
and we had fish. Okay. And when they altered all of that, when the cows left, I knew that in the 1970s. When the cows and the farms leave, the fish will leave too. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow. Wow.
That's my belief.
Yeah.
But it was oh, you're polluting the river, or you're doing this, and never, with the exception of a few cases, and those cases are still in existence. The ones that were polluting are still there. Okay, and all the rest of them are gone. Yeah, I could go, like I said, 13 of them just on this road. It was too difficult to fight the regulations and
Yeah.
To make what they were requiring to do too
Mhm.
expensive. And so people go, okay, do something else, it's
Okay.
yours.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
Wow. Well, I heard that these farms, all the dairy farms, were just beautiful. Tom said all the fences were always painted.
Yep.
And everything looked very trim all the time and, painted and beautiful.
Yeah.
When he was growing up and so forth.
And it's just like my wife and I still make hay. She has horses, and we have some cattle and sheep. And not a dairy farm, not a 24/7 deal anymore.
Yeah.
But it used to be that there were an abundance of high school boys or high school kids, like even when my kids were in high school, that you could hire somebody to help with that labor.
Yeah, right.
It's not there anymore. You can't do it.
My phone's gonna go out. Yeah.
What happened? Huh?
Okay. So we've got to end our program, huh?
Yeah, my phone's running down.
Okay. Well, Ken, Eunice, thank you so much.
Yeah, you can get together with him for more later, another time.
Sure. Well, think about what else you might want to do and let Country know, when you're ready, and we can do another part 2.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.